shamed her into coming.
She did.
Yeah.
She said, "You're getting lazy. Come on." And I thought about that today.
I was in the funk for a year.
Yeah, yeah,
And the thing that kept me going was the temple.
yeah.
Kept on
Oh, that's
watching the
good.
Zooms.
That's
That
good.
really helped me.
Good.
And
We had an unveiling this past week, on Sunday. So my niece from Texas came in with her kids and stayed at our house. So, and Emily's in town, so it was a busy household. But everybody left on Tuesday, and man, that night I've been sleeping since. I'm so tired.
Sure.
So,
It's good to have everybody
Yeah.
around, and it's good when everybody leaves.
yeah.
How are your babies? Okay. When are you going? Are they coming in? They were here in July.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And the next time I was supposed to see them was November.
Yeah.
And I decided yesterday I can't go that long.
Oh, well, I was going to say that is huge. I mean, I may
July
have
to
to wait.
November, like it's like so long. So I'm going out for a week at the end of September.
Yay. Good.
I just said to Mark I'm not going to make it. He said that's a little
What's going on with you? Anything special?
No.
so I just
Yes.
put in Eric Cartner's.
We still got more
Can't
copies
you
of
look up
Ethan
the Spice
Davidson's
Hey,
book.
sweetheart.
You have here 10, I think.
So Ruth would like one.
Okay. Do you have more? Or those are the only ones?
This is for today.
Okay.
But she wants Ethan's book.
Eric.
Ah, from,
Is it
yeah,
read by
here
Eric?
it is a book. Yeah, I
And
have
how many
more.
Erics have you got in your?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else need a book?
For what number? What?
Oh, no. It's a guy we study with.
Okay, only
I'll
one
find
person
it
wants
here
it.
somewhere.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I've been trying to get one and I only
Yeah,
come
I will
here on
bring one here.
Sundays.
Do you need chapter 43? Anyone need chapter 43?
No,
Or you good?
I think you sent it to us. Here, I got it. Here. Eric Bat. Eric Bat. His last name is Bat.
BAT, B-A-T-T. And it's,
514-4143.
yep.
Okay.
So anyway, I'll call him. Monday? You should call him early on Monday.
No,
Yeah,
Monday.
me too.
Monday. Actually, Monday
No,
or Tuesday.
no, not
was
really.
fine.
Yeah.
So they've got one confirmed case.
Yeah. Well, we're supposed to go to Washington, D.C. on Monday to visit my brother-in-law. There's one confirmed case in nursing home. So they may stop to visit, so I don't know. I'll show you a picture.
Not a problem. Anyone else need chapter 43? Yeah. You got it. Okay. And I will leave it here in my home, okay?
Thanks.
Oh my God.
And I will bring the book.
So happy and so he just the cutest thing in the world. Isn't he awesome?
Yes.
And he got his helmet off yesterday. He had that helmet that he's wearing. He had a flat head and he graduated yesterday. He got his helmet off because
Jews in Afghanistan.
Right. You want to give me a countdown?
are they really?
There were.
Pardon me?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, can we restart the live so it's not like a long pre-roll?
William just turned 10 months
Okay.
today.
They're not hearing me now, or they are hearing me now?
Is he crawling, leaping?
Hi, everybody. Okay, let's go ahead. Good morning. How's everybody? Welcome. If you're here in person or online, we have a lot of tables because we've got a lot of events at Temple. So there's a bigger event coming next. So don't be. We're also well distanced. And we're here learning the Tanya with our intrepid class. We've been learning for 2 years, and we're at chapter 42, finishing 42. So if you're joining us, this is a highly kabbalistic text that is teaching us how to be a Bainani, how to be a highly functioning spiritual individual that controls your thought, speech, and action 100% of the time to always do the right thing. So that's all our behavior, thought, speech, and action. So if you're curious about that, please look back at some of the review classes. I'm happy to answer questions if you let me know. These chapters, we're looking at the first of the two components of what's called kavanah. So kavanah, I know, is used to mean general intention, but in Kabbalah, kavanah, it talks about two spiritual emotions that function as two wings of anything we do, to let it elevate and join with godliness in whatever spiritual world we can have access to. So if you want your hearing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and giving of tzedakah and prayers and learning to elevate like a bird and fly up and unite with godliness, you need both the emotion of love and the emotion of awe, of yira. And we learned that of those two, the first one you need is yira, is reverence, because it creates a sense of holiness. It gets me out of the way. It makes me small. When I have a sense of awe in front of something, it's important, I'm less important. It's reality, and I'm small, or maybe even gone. So we need to get me out of the way for anything to have kedusha, holiness, and that's a starting point. And then when you have love, it's a love that's based on holiness, not a love based on me still having an ego involved. And then we're going to get to ahava and the different levels of love, of ahava. But we've learned about this first introductory basic level of yira called yira tata, lower level fear. And the meditation that we do is simply to picture as well as I can the greatness of God, picture as well as I can that God is aware of everything, creating everything, in charge of everything, and then that God is paying particular attention to me and what I do, as if God is standing right there in front of me right now, looking and saying, have I prepared for this class? Am I warm enough with every student? Have I invited those online? God's looking at me saying, Smolash, are you phoning it in, or do you mean this? And if I imagine God's right behind, looking into my mind and my heart and my guts and seeing where I'm at, now I know, okay, I am accountable, and it fills me with a sense, at least, of, as the Alter Rebbe said, of being able to inhibit myself to the same extent as if just a stranger was watching me. Inhibit myself to the same extent as if I was just in public, in any public situation, when I wouldn't misbehave. So that's not a huge bar, but in fact puts us at a very high level if we do it consistently. And the Alter Rebbe just said, that's the idea of faith. Faith comes from the word uman, which means craftsman or artisan, and you just want to keep crafting your focus and your framework for the world so that you constantly remember God's here, God's watching me, and God cares what I do. And then that sense of inhibition will become second nature, and I'll have that lower level of fear. Now let's finish chapter 42, and then we're going to go on to the higher level of fear, and then be introduced to the two levels of love that we're going to be working with. Any questions about that? And let me open up Facebook and see if there's anybody that's on Facebook that also has questions. I will open up the stream. We're on Danelle. We're on Temple Stream. Danelle? I'm guessing we're on Temple Stream. So let me find that. But let's begin. וגם להיות לזיכרון תמיד לשון חכמינו זיכרונם לברכה קבלת עול מלכות שמיים שהוא כעניין שום תשים עליך מלך. Doreen, do you want to grab this microphone? Can you pass the mic? Sorry, we're on top of page 651. 651. Doreen, do you want to take this microphone? Noreen, can you pass it to Doreen? Or Danelle, can you help us out? Thanks. And I'm going to pull up, as we're doing that, I'm going to pull up Temple's video. And if you have any questions, please put those up on Temple's website. Go ahead, Doreen. There should be.
Does not depend on prior contemplation, but rather on pure faith, of the dictum of the sages, of blessed memory, acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, which parallels the injunction, you shall appoint a king, that is God, over you. has been explained elsewhere, and so on.
כמו שהתבהר במקום אחר וכו'. Right, so this is how we finish the chapter. We say yes, and Dorian, why don't you pass the mic down? We'll need it going around. Yes, we have all these meditations. We want to remember that everything we see is the garment of God. And yet, at the end of this chapter, we say, even if, after all this meditating, no sense of awe and reverence descends on me, there's still a level that we can have that, in fact, is in some ways higher than all these levels of awe, and that is just doing it. Just doing it. When you have, what do you call it, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven on you, if I'm an ox and there's a yoke on me and there's a row of field in front of me, I just walk, right? If I'm an ox and I want to walk, does it matter? No, I walk. That's what I do. It's my nature, right? That's what I do. So there is a level where even if I wake up one morning and it's a busy day and I'm stressed and whatever it may be, I don't have this sense of awe. When I still do the right thing at that time, even though I have no emotional motivation, maybe it's just, I'm just making myself do it, that perhaps is an even higher level because, look, if there's a fire and I run from the fire, that's natural. Of course I'm going to run from the fire because I'm afraid. But if I don't want to sit down and learn a Hebrew verb table and I just do it anyways, now I'm doing it with no motivation. I'm doing it just because I know that's the right thing. I know that's what God wants, and I'm doing it no matter what. So in a sense, this is the anchor that should always be with us, a sense that we have a basic minimum standard for ourselves. We say, these are the mitzvahs I'm going to do. This is the behavior I'm going to emulate. This is the behavior I'm not going to do. And no matter what, even if I'm not motivated by any emotions, I'm still going to take on the yoke. I'm going to say, that's what I have to do. I'm like a servant, right? And I'm going to get up in the morning and get started no matter what my emotional state. Yeah, I'm going to try and meditate. Yeah, I'm going to create awe and love, and that will fill it with a soul. But even if I have to do it completely forcing myself with no emotional content, I'm still going to do it because that's an even higher level of service in some ways.
You told us that a long time ago that the animal soul doesn't want you to do it, and you go ahead and do it anyway. It's even more of a mitzvah.
So it's a good way of looking at it, yes. So when you don't want to do something, and probably I don't think the comment was heard. Where's the mic on your side? Yeah, maybe it was. I don't. So the comment was, when your animal soul's resisting, or the drive of the animal soul doesn't want to do it, and you force yourself anyways, it creates tremendous, tremendous light and glory on high, so to speak, because we have knocked down klipa. We've knocked down our superficial side. So there's that side too. There's great benefit to just pushing through and doing it. And even if you have to white knuckle it that day, I'm doing it because I decided I'm going to do it. And as an aside, I know in Reform Judaism, we're allergic to that. We say, well, if I don't understand this mitzvah, so I'm not going to do it, right? And I get that. We want to have a rich understanding of a mitzvah. We want it to make sense. We want it to connect. And I'm not going to argue with that approach. But I would add, there's also an advantage to saying, you know what? I don't understand the mitzvah. I don't feel like it. I'm going to do it just because Judaism says that's what Jews do. I'm going to do it just because I've said, God has asked Jews to do this. I've set myself that standard, and even though today I'm not into it, I'm going to do it anyways. And that has a particular quality that I think we can benefit from. Lost my page. כמו שנתבהר במקום אחר, כי הקדוש ברוך הוא מניח את העליונים והתחתונים, ומייחד מלכותו עלינו וכולו, ואנחנו מקבלים וכולו. Go ahead, Sue Ellen.
And this is the...
For God.
Oh. For God blessed be he, foregoes the creation of the higher and the lower worlds. They are not the ultimate intent of the creation, and uniquely bestowed his kingdom upon us, and we accept the heavenly yoke.
Because that's the greatness of this setup. There's this whole spiritual system. There's a whole series of worlds that God created, each one even vaster than the physical universe. And yet, in all that, God's paying special attention to little us and saying, no, I want you to take on the yoke of my kingdom. Everything else does it automatically, right? A lion is 100% being a lion. A gnat is 100% on being a gnat. An angel is 100% on being an angel. The sun does exactly what I want, etc. So all of creation does exactly what God wants. God only left one space in creation, and it's only you and me. We're the only beings in all of creation that have this special space, where God said, I'm going to let you do whatever you want. Free will. Yeah, I'm going to let you do whatever you want, and now I'm going to ask you to actually do what I want in order to make me your authority. I want you to take on the yoke of doing the right thing. And that's amazing. We're the only thing, the only phenomenon in the universe that has that special skill, that special power, that we can do the wrong thing. And when we do the right thing, we, as we do on Rosh Hashanah, we crown God King, and we bring the yoke of God's sovereignty on us. So that's it. It's up to you and me. The entire universe depends on us. V'zehu inyan. And here's a nice way to connect to this. I know these are kind of lofty ideas, but there's a time in the day when this comes to the fore. V'zehu inyan hishtachavot shebitfilat yudchet achar kabbalat ol malchut shamayim b'dibur b'kriyat shema. Noreen, you want to go ahead?
And this is the significance of the obeisances in the prayer of the 18 benedictions following the verbal acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of heaven in the reading of Shema, when we say, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and so on.
Right, so when we're in, this is the Amida, right? This is Ad Hashem Sefata Tiftachu Fi Baruch Atah Ad Hashem Elokeinu. So we do this at every service. And what do we do when we do Baruch? We bow down. We all bow down. Right? And maybe we do it because we know that's the choreography, or because we saw our parents do it, or because we learned from our rabbis to do it. But here's a deep spiritual meaning. That's the significance of when you bow down during the Amida, and there's different times you bow down, in Modeh, Ani, etc. But whenever you bow down, what are you doing? You're saying, I'm not important, God is important. I'm not important, God's important. I'm saying, whatever it is that's the right thing to do, God has left me with the responsibility to do that. I'm going to take on that yoke. God's my boss, right? And whether I like it or not, the idea of the Amida is I am out of the way, I am nullified, I'm not there, I'm just part of the oneness, and it's just whatever God wants matters, and then hopefully I leave it with that sense that in the rest of the day I have that anchor of that basic acceptance of the yoke, no matter even what I'm feeling. לחזור ולקבל בפועל ממש במעשה וכו' כמו שנתבאר במקום אחר. Go ahead, Ruth.
Whereby one accepts it once again in actual deed and so on, for by bowing in the course of the prayer of the Amidah, one shows one's acceptance in actual deed of one's self-nullification to God, as is explained elsewhere.
And of course, this is, Slichot is this weekend, Rosh Hashanah is breathing down our backs, it's Elul, and so this is when we do that. What is Rosh Hashanah about? It's about reestablishing all of us together, that there's only one being here, that one being has a set of do and don'ts, and that one being is in charge. So if you want to talk about Kabbalah, Malchut of Atzilut, right? So the Shechina, the lowest of the Sfirot in Atzilut, all the energy from last year goes up on Rosh Hashanah. It leaves the world, and then a new pack of energy for the year comes down. And during Rosh Hashanah, that's when we actually build the new Malchut of Atzilut for the coming year. So by us eliciting all the different qualities within the Sfirot, chesed, love, gevura, strength, compassion, etc., we shine light into that new Malchut, and all of us are working together to build the new Malchut that comes down on Rosh Hashanah, and that is the kabbalistic description of God wants us to do the right thing, and we're going to put God in charge for this year. And I'm even going to blow the shofar and say, God, this is the trumpet saying that, you are the one that's in charge, and I want to flow with that. I want to be out of the way. I want God's truth to shine through me in every simple moment, right? Making food for my kids, doing the chores, teaching, learning, giving tzedakah, whatever it is. So let's get ourselves in that mindset. Today is Elul, so you do blow the shofar every day to get ourselves warmed up. So you want to stand up. There's no blessing. And if you're online, you try and find someone to do this live in person, because it's much more effective when you hear it right in the space. So I'll do 3 sets of blasts, each one consisting of 3 sounds. Have a good Rosh Hashanah. We should crown God King. And let's go on to chapter 43. So these chapters are all about the dynamic that if you think something, you're going to feel about it. We know this from life. Someone's crazy about golf, thinks about golf 8 hours a day. The moment I mention golf, they get very excited, right? Somebody thinks about some stressful situation, and it runs over and over in their mind. The moment someone brings them up, they get stressed. They get afraid. So we know it's human nature. When I think about something, I'll feel it. So now we have a system of meditation we've learned, and feel free to look back. We've taught it in many different ways over the past couple of years, where we want to insert divine concepts in order to build emotions. And the rest of these chapters, from here all the way through to 50, is basically just stuff to think about. You can say it's a divine concept to insert into our meditation, but it's as simple as that. When I focus my mind on something, I am crafting my emotional landscape, I'm changing my emotional body, and I'm giving myself divine emotions, or divine soul emotions, that can elevate all the Torah mitzvahs that I do. That's the why. That's why we meditate. So now we've learned, everything we've learned so far has been about the lower level of awe. And now we're going to learn that even in the lower level of awe, there's 2 levels before I get to the higher level of awe. And Cindy's smiling because, there's always many, many levels. I always like, before I go on, we've learned that the lower level of awe is inspired by thinking about the greatness of the world and how God runs the whole world and God wants me to do the right thing. That's a lower level because it's always attached to the world, which isn't really God. Right? I know the world is God, but the world is something God is doing. God is making the world happen by speech right now. God's creating the world. So we have a big problem with people that say, oh, nature is God, because nature's not God. Nature is God, but God is completely outside of nature. Nature's just one thing God was doing. And if God had a resume, and God was applying for any job, the creation of the entire world would not make it onto God's resume. The creation of the whole world will not make it onto God's resume. If you say God's great because God created the world, you're missing everything about God, and you're missing the whole point of who God is, that from God's perspective, the world doesn't even exist. The world's not even there. The world is, as we'll see, just motivated by God's speech and created by God's speech. And God's speech is just, like if I said one word, how can you say that's me? That's just one word. And that one word is doing something. That's not me, I'm something else. That's just one word I did. So everything we've learned about why we should fear God by meditating on anything having to do with the world, that's actually losing track of the truth of what God is. That God's greatness is not because God created the world. That's just the easiest way for us to relate to God's greatness. It's a beginner way. But in that lower level of fear, there's still 2 levels, because we have the physical world, which can inspire us. I can say, God creates volcanoes and the sun and the ocean and all these powerful forces and magnificent Grand Canyon, and so I'm full of awe. But the physical world is much smaller, as we'll see, than the spiritual worlds which, quote-unquote, surround it. And so the higher level of lower level fear, which he calls the greatness of the lower level fear, that is not from meditating on the physical world, but from meditating on the spiritual worlds, and a little bit of what we understand about, so to speak, the size. It's not physical size, because it's all spiritual, but how many levels greater the spiritual worlds are than what we perceive with our physical senses. Let's dive in. Concerning v'hineh al yirat hata'ah zo shehi l'kiyum mitzvotav yitbarech b'vchinat surmera v'aseh tov. Go ahead, Dan.
Concerning this level of yira tata, of which it was said in the previous chapter that it is in the province of every Jew, which is necessary for the fulfillment of his commandments in both areas of turn away from evil and do good. That is, the performance of the negative and positive commands.
All right, so going way back, we said, basically, you need love to do I'm going to do, the positive mitzvahs, and you need fear to do don't do this. And the Alter Rebbe said, whoa, hold on. You actually need fear for both. You need fear for both. You need a little bit of yira to do even a beautiful mitzvah that I love. You know, I love waving the lulav netrog. I look forward to it. What's fear got to do with it? What's reverence and awe? I love doing it. I'm going to rush to do it. So I'm going to get a nice etrog. I got to call someone, make sure I get a beautiful one this year, right? I'm thinking about it already. And I go, and you're not going to stop me. Like, I'm going to run and do it. I've got no problem. What's fear? He says, no. Remember, you need fear even to do the positive mitzvahs, because that's how something is holy. Awe, yira, gets me out of the way, and lets holiness rest on the thing. Let's holiness rest on the thing. Then put all the love you want into it, right? It's going to fly right up. But you need that second wing, or rather first wing. You need the wing of yira so that it will be able to fly up right to the godliness in whatever world.
What does tata'ah mean exactly?
Lower. Ila, tata.
That's what I was thinking. So
Yeah.
that's Aramaic.
Yeah. I believe it is.
Yeah.
Amru, Yemein Yira Ein Chochma.
It is said by our sages, if there is no fear, there is no wisdom. If fear of God is lacking, then one cannot properly fulfill the Torah and the mitzvot.
So the whole quote, I think it's from Pirkei Avot. He doesn't give a footnote here. It's unusual. It says, if there's no fear, there's no wisdom. But then the sages also say, if there's no wisdom, there's no fear. So you got this catch-22. Because they say, if there's no fear, there's no wisdom. Good, let me work on fear, and then I'll get wisdom. Let me meditate on the greatness of God, and etc. And finally, I'll be wise. But then the sages say, if there's no wisdom, there's no fear. So I say, well, okay, I guess I need wisdom before fear. So let me go learn Torah, do something, or meditate, or sit by a sage and get some wisdom. Then I can have fear. But hold on, if there's no fear, there's no wisdom. So how am I going to start? Where do I start? And the answer is, it's because there's a lower level and a higher level of fear. So one level of fear, you just start with. This is what we've been learning. I look at the world, I say, wow, God's creating this. God needs me to do the right thing. Okay, better do that, right? And that leads me to do what? To love other Jews, to learn Torah, to give some of my money to tzedakah, because it wasn't mine to begin with. The tzedakah was there for tzedakah. It leads me to learn and do mitzvahs. And then, once I've gotten used to that, once that's my new me, that level of doing Torah and mitzvahs, that becomes chokhmah, and that leads to this higher level of fear we're going to learn about. So that answers the question. Yes, if there's no fear, there's no wisdom. That's the lower level of fear. Then when I have that wisdom, now, if there's no wisdom, there's no fear, that's this higher level of fear we're going to learn about, which deals with God's essence, not with just something God's doing in the world. But backing up, the lower level of fear, v'yeshba b'chinat katnut v'chinat gadlut.
This lower level of fear comprises a mode of smallness and a mode of greatness.
So everything we've learned about lower level fear in the meditations, we can be doing it mini or maxi. We can do micro or macro. Right? There's a small version and a big version. There's an expanded version or a contracted version. דהיינו כשנשמשכת בחינת יראה זו מההתבוננות בגדולת השם.
This means That is, fear has the quality of greatness, when this category of lower level of fear is the result of contemplation on the greatness of God as it is perceived through his providing life to creation, that he fills all worlds.
De'ihu memale kol amin, that he fills all worlds. Umeha'aretz larakia mahalach taf kuf shana v'chulu uvein rakia l'rakia chulu.
And from the earth to the heavens is the distance of 500 years, and the distance from one heaven to the next is also a journey of 500 years.
So what does this 500 years mean, right? I mean, you can imagine, the actual astronomy at the time did believe that there were spheres, right? That the Earth was the center of everything, and then there was spheres around that, actual kind of physical spheres and also heavenly spheres, and that the stars were in one of the spheres, that's why they went around the Earth, right, seemingly, and that the planets were in other spheres, because that's why they didn't move with the stars, they had another sphere. And that was, they hadn't flown up, so that was their best model, and everybody just assumed that, like we today still assume that physical matter is real. Right? We still assume that, even though science has said physical matter is not real. It's taken about a century for us, and we still haven't absorbed that. We still think we're walking around in a real physical world, right? Even though quantum physics says not at all. It's all emptiness. It's just energy posing as physical matter, right? So we look back and we say, how funny that they thought they were, physical spheres, and they were in some kind of, what do you call this, Russian doll? Yeah, a Russian doll system. We're nested inside each other. That's so innocent and naive, and yet we still haven't caught up with 100 years of quantum physics ourselves. So it's just how it goes. Your worldview usually takes a while to catch up. But what does it mean? You could say, okay, for us to get to the first of the spheres, you'd have to walk for 500 years. And if you see how long it takes for someone to walk for 500 years, that's the physical distance to get to the next sphere. It doesn't really work in terms of astronomy, although people have pointed out you can take the years and you can say, for God, 1 year is 1,000 years, or 1 day is 1,000 years, and then it expands and actually sometimes does get to the dimensions you need for light years in space, etc. That's not really my thing. We're not talking about physical space at all, right? We're talking about the heavens, so 500 years just means 500 complete levels. I want to think about, how maybe you're more mature now than when you were a baby, and how many more years mature you are. Same thing here, that the physical world has a spiritual world above it, which is 500 years or levels or complete cycles beyond it. So it's just a metaphor for us to try and grasp the greatness of the first of the physical heavens that is creating the physical world.
Is it something that we can reach?
Well,
or does it make it an impossible thing?
Yes, the tzaddikim are said, to be able to elevate and ascend and have conversations and look at heaven and deal with what's going on. So we hear stories about personalities that could perceive those realities. They didn't have to fly anywhere, right? They were just sitting, usually, in a state of dvekus, of cleaving to divinity, and they were able to ascend and look at what was happening and even tweak what was going to be happening. But that's not what these systems of meditation are about. You might have very spiritual experiences, but this is a emotion-building meditation rather than a soul-ascending meditation that we're learning.
It makes it almost unattainable to put it in that, with that great a number. Yeah. For most souls, while they're in a body, it's not attainable to go up and kind of walk around in heaven and see what's going on and speak to the Mashiach or whatever they do. So that's true. For most souls, that's a very rare occurrence and probably just comes as a gift from above if they feel you need it. But we can affect changes there. Even if we're not sensitive to it, doesn't mean we can't affect changes there. So when I drink coffee with a blessing and then use it to teach something, or when I blow a shofar, even though I can't go up and look, I know in my mind's eye that I'm creating light, not just in the heavens, but in the source of the heavens that's flowing down through the heavens and changing everything. So we can get an inner sense, and we can know that our work is to actually create dynamic changes with light in the heavens and above the heavens. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to go up and and kind of look at it the way a big tzaddik can. Does it make sense?
And then imagine all these heavens and the 500 years from one to the next to the next. And then we have the angels, the chayot, raglei hachayot keneged kulan v'chulu.
The feet, that is the lowest level of the angels, called chayot, measure up to them all.
Right, so if you were to measure all the distance between the heavens, and then you look at the angels that are just standing right there, the feet of the angels is as big as the space between us and the heavens. Right, so imagine the physical world, now imagine 500 years to the next heaven, and then imagine the feet of the angels as big as all that, and then imagine the angels themselves and the size they are. So we're basically trying to take any sense of awe that we had from perceiving the physical world and just blowing it to a completely other proportion by 500 times 500 times 500. It keeps going until we realize that the spiritual worlds are so much greater than the physical worlds, and that leads me to a much deeper sense of awe. That, if I thought the physical world was awe-inspiring, imagine if I could see the spiritual worlds and the distances between them and the angels within them and the whole thing. וכן השתלשלות כל העולמות למעלה מעלה עד רום המעלות.
And similarly with one's contemplation on the evolvement of all the worlds, one above the other to the topmost heights of the most spiritual worlds.
Right, so that's one heaven and the chayot. There's 7 heavens with 500 years distance, so to speak, between each of them. Each one is a huge step above the next. And then the feet of the angels measure all that, and imagine the size of the angels. And of course, there's many angels in heaven. God has tens of thousands of regiments. It's endless. So at that point, the amount of fear you might have had from the physical world is now dwarfed, considering in our mind's eye the greatness of the spiritual worlds. But still, even if we get to this level of fear, this greatness, it's still the lower level of fear. Why? Because this is all still what God's creating. This is not God. We're not reverent of God here. And let me explain it with an example. This is from Tully Silverberg. I watch his classes. I highly recommend them. He says, what's the difference between the feeling I have when I'm looking at a king and when I'm looking at a tzaddik? So picture of yourself like the biggest tzaddik, maybe Moses, right? Here's Moses standing in front of us. And Moses is going, 3,000 years of Judaism, Smolash, and this is what you're doing with it, right? And he's looking me right in the eye, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Moses. It's like, right? Or imagine I'm standing in front of a king. Imagine I'm God help, the people that are in Afghanistan right now, but someone's in charge, and say I'm an American stuck there, and they drag me in, and this person's in charge of all of Afghanistan, and they could kill me like that, and they bring me in, and he says, why shouldn't I kill you? And right. What's the difference between the awe that I feel in front of a ruler and the awe that I feel in front of a tzaddik? What is it? Let's look at the ruler first. It's just conversation. What makes a ruler awe-inspiring? What is it about them? What am I actually in awe of? Power. You said power. Power over what? Okay, my life. What else? What's kingdom? The kingdom, right? So essentially, if I were to have President Biden in a room with the president of, some small island nation, and I looked at both of them, am I going to have the same awe of both of them? Why not? Yeah, but the people, the president of the other nation might be wiser, might be bigger, stronger, might be physically more imposing, but I'm not actually afraid of the person, right? I don't have awe of the person. What I have awe of is that they are the ruler over many, many people. So the ruler of China gives me more awe than the ruler of Norway, right? That they have perhaps a lot of force. They rule over armies. One of them has hundreds of nuclear weapons. The other one has, maybe some small ships and a small army. Even influence, like when they say something, the world changes. If the President of the United States says, that Michael Smolash is a real piece of work, right? Oh, that's it, my life is over, right? Now I've got paparazzi, trying to get my picture about why I'm such a bad person. And if the president says, that Michael Smolash, I wish everyone was like him, now suddenly, I'm on the top of the world. So whether it's influence, number of people they're in power over, actual physical power, whatever it might be, I'm not actually having yira for the leader, him or herself. Right? Obama now is a big deal, but look, you're not as in awe of Obama now as when Obama was in power and was the chief, leader-in-chief. Is that what you call it? Commander-in-chief, pardon me. My Canadian roots showing. Now, why am I afraid? Why do I have yira of a tzaddik? Why, if Moses were standing here, would all of us, be afraid to even speak a word, right? What is it about Moses? Is Moses, Moses is maybe a bad example because Moses was in charge. But let's take Joseph. Joseph was also in charge. Joseph was vice president. But take 100%. No, I'm trying to find a tzaddik that didn't have political power. That's what I'm trying to find. So, the Baal Shem Tov, right? Imagine the Baal Shem Tov is here, one of the greatest masters that had ever lived, who sees right through someone's heart, who knows everything about someone, who's plugged in, who can see into the heavens. And here I am, and someone asked me a question. I don't even open my mouth because the Baal Shem Tov is here. Why am I in awe of the Baal Shem Tov? Does he have any armies? Right? Is he the leader of anything? Connection to God, right? It's actually about his essence. There's something about him that's just holy, and I am actually in awe of who he is, and it doesn't matter if he's here dressed in rags or if he comes down and it turns out, oh, he was the Messiah, here he's back. It doesn't matter, right? It's just who he is. And it doesn't matter if he has wealth or no wealth, if he has power or no power. I am in awe of the essence of that tzaddik. That is the core of higher level fear. Because the lower level of fear, if you look at it, has all been about God's garments, what God is doing. It's all about focusing on creation and how great is creation and what's my role in creation. I have to fix creation and now the heavenly aspects of creation that are even bigger. But none of that has anything to do with God. God's still the same as before creation, and God hasn't changed, and creation's not even there compared to God. So if all my fear is based on just what God's doing, that's like my awe of a political leader, which, when they're out of power, it's gone. It's all about the externals. But if you want to talk about the essence of someone, now that's the awe I have for tzaddik. Doesn't matter what they're doing, I'm just in awe of them. And it's in that way, when we have awe for God's essence itself, that we jump to that higher level of awe, which is an eternal awe, an awe of God's essence and the godliness that's in the worlds, not anything to do with the worlds themselves. Cindy has a comment. You get on the microphone? Can you just speak to the microphone? So.
The lower level fear you're dealing with, your example, it's the power. It's the power that one wields. And how does that affect me? Versus the higher level fear, you're seeing that essence of someone else. You're no longer in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So a second aspect, and very well put, Cindy, it's not simply that I'm not focusing on God's externals, I'm focusing on God's essence. Also, the point of awe is to nullify my ego. And what makes my ego more nullified? To look at how great the world is, and so I'm in awe and I'm gone. Or to look at God's essence, and so I'm gone. So, yeah, if you're looking at it in terms of ego nullification, the higher level fear is much more complete and has a different quality, because I'm not relying on like, oh, how great the worlds are, and therefore. Make sense? So let's go through, and this is the hallmark of the system, is that we're meditating in order to understand and generate emotions, and we want to have very clear delineations between which emotion we're working with right now, and what it can accomplish, and what level I'm at, and what it leads to, and what it comes from. So everything we've learned is lower level fear, and you can work on the small